Following is an unrehearsed interview with Mrs. Beulah Parker. Most of the people in this area call her Miss Beulah, though for the tape I will call her Miss Parker in respect for her age. She is a widow and lives in a red brick house in the southeast corner of Wadesboro Road and Arden Road in an area of Marshall County called Oak Level. This tape is being done by Joey Lewis for the Marshall County Library and for the Kentucky Oral History Project. The interview was conducted in her home on Friday, November 11th, 1977. No, please go ahead.
Well, what I told last night, okay?
Oh yeah, and well, you were starting to talk about your father raising tobacco.
Yeah. Well, he raised tobacco, corn, hogs, and we worked out in that. And sorghum, made their own molasses. The old time sorghum mills. They was familiar with me. Well, they'd have that long tongue or whatever you'd call it, out there, and hitch a horse to that. It'd go around and around and grind their sorghum, And, well, Mama raised geese, things like that. Just worked on the farm. I never had much energy in the house. Well, I'd help her too when I got back to the house. And then back on down to, I've heard my mama tell about them things now. I'm a little too young for that. She said the mail didn't have mail carriers like they do now. That Uncle Henry Owens, an old man down here, he'd ride a mule up here to the post office. He'd bring all the mail down here, and there was a store. Uncle Jim Reeves run the store right there in that corner of Ezra Lee's yard.
Oh.
Great big store. And he'd bring their mail all down here and take it in there at that store. Had a little building in there that they called that their post office, and the people would go in and pick up their mail. Of course, there couldn't be very much down this way and bring it on a mule.
About how long ago was that?
Well, that is back in my mama's young days. She died in 58. That was back in her young days. I never did remember that. Well, I wasn't born, no way. And on down to that guys I told about, they had that, I reckon it was the candidates speaking. I don't hardly remember that too well, but they had that dinner over there in the yard, barbecue, that house that they moved from over there. And they had speakings that evening, all, and that man walked that rope from this building right here in this corner over to the old shop over there across that road. And that was interesting to me. See that man walk a rope with his feet in a toe sack now. He'd hold him, had it fastened to him some way. He was, of course, it was a big rope.
That was the two buildings that were here?
A great big barn. I don't remember just whether it was a stock barn or I suppose it was. It's on this side of the road here in this yard.
Where the church is?
No, the church was back at the cemetery down there.
Where the church is now?
Yeah, and that was the old shop down there. And, they had that rope fastened to that, and then across the road there, at the, whatever you call that, eave or gable or something. And he walked that plumb across there. Of course, he took his time. I mean, that was interesting. I was just real small when that happened. And about that man getting killed. Of course, now I may not be telling it right, jumping from one thing to another to suit you. And that man that, it was Sloon. So our Uncle Barry Badgett, he was a real old man when he died, and he's been dead for several years. said they had a saloon out here and sold liquor and things like that. And there's a man shot him. It's right there along about where that old little old tree is out there in the yard. And then that man they found dead down there, well, down here by the Save Feaser old place, if you know where that is.
Yeah, not right offhand.
Well, it's, well, I don't know if you know anybody in there or not. It's that old house, just as that road turns, you know, to go through there. It's the old house right in there. Found him in that ditch. It's not, well, it's not hardly a mile from here. And didn't nobody know, never did. So he said, never did learn who the man was, didn't have no identification on him. Back them days, they didn't, well, hunt for anything too much.
Yeah.
And the county went ahead and buried him, he said.
I understand this whole area around here used to be a really rough place.
Let's see.
I understand this whole area, Oak Level, used to be a really rough place.
Well, yes, I've heard it. Well, Mr. Badgett and Mr. Jim Reeves that run that store over there, he lived there where Ezra Lee lives. And they was that parsonage and saloon, blacksmith shop, grist mill. Now there's a sawmill and a grist mill. They told them, well, I know the sawmill was here. And on this spot of ground. And then there was a drugstore just, well, I guess the church owns that ground now, right in there. And then just past it was a sawmill, grist mill. And then Uncle Henry Owens, up there where Mr. Wilson lives, well, right in there was another grist mill. Uncle Henry Owens operated that.
But
And of course, on down later years then, after, well, we are married and we moved down here, there's a grist mill. Rose May's grandfather, Lee Copeland, run it. Right over there by Rose May's house. And, well, now there's a lot of things, I guess, that I don't remember. I have forgot some way or another, but I know of them things mighty well.
Most of that was here when you were growing up?
Let's see.
Most of those things were here when you were growing up?
Well, yeah. Well, see, I was married when we moved down here in these mills. Of course, this one was moved away from my mother-in-law. Lived here in the old house right there. And she died. And we moved here then. Well, I can't remember though what year that was. It's been several from my oldest child is 56, I believe, 55, 56. And of course the church is here. Well, I can't think of his name now. Oh, what do you call it? Prize tobacco? I believe that's what they call it in them days. He'd go around the barns and buy the tobacco. And I reckon now that they brought it in over there, hold it in to him. A big old barn. I reckon that stood on Ezra Lee's ground there, or on y'all right back of Mamie's there. I don't know just which now, but I remember the barn pretty well. And I reckon now that I don't know if buyers come and bought it from him or whether he just took it on somewhere to sell. I don't know just how that went. I don't know if I was born then or not. That was 1904 when I was born. And so I don't remember seeing any of it, but I know I've heard the old people talk a lot about it.
let me see, you were born right down here at the end of
Where
Oklahoma.
Cag lives, you know, the house was on down closer to the road than his. I was born and raised there till I was married. Well, I married when I was 15. And we moved, well, we lived up there in Mamie's house. It burnt. Well, Mamie and them bought it after we moved down here. My husband and Mom and Daddy didn't get along too well, so just moved on down here, sort of keep peace with them. And well, my husband drank a lot, and they didn't believe in that, no. And so, well, they done fairly well that way. And then the house that was moved here, and my mother-in-law lived in, was a drugstore that's down just below the church right there. Between the church and, well, Miss Fralick's daughter there, Hicks, I believe she married. I don't know.
I'm not sure about the names of the people down here.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, how did your family happen to come to this area?
Well, I think Dad was born over on Tennessee River. And when he was a boy, I'd hear him tell about this and that, and fishing and things like that over there on Tennessee River. Well, I don't really know exactly how come his daddy and family to move over here where, well, it used to be called the Brazil Schoolhouse, but they've tore that down now. And they was living there when I can remember, and on until they died, they lived there. And then Mom and Dad bought that place there where, from her daddy, where I was born and raised.
What, did they teach school or something? You said they moved to the schoolhouse.
What'd you?
Did they teach school or something? You said they moved.
No, Dad was a farmer.
Oh.
He went to farm, and he said when he was just big enough to barely reach the plow handles, he had the lines tied to the handles that way, or sometime he'd put them around his neck, and said he went to plowing when he was just that size. And he worked on the farm ever since. Till, well, he just got so old and feeble he just couldn't do it. And I brought him down here with me because, well, Mom had fell and broke her leg, and we had got a hospital bed for her. She couldn't get around anymore while she lived. And Dad died in '57. She died in '58.
What about?
I see.
Now I have another question. You know, all of this at one time was pretty built up. When did it kind of?
Yeah, there was an old store right there where that one is, only closer to the road. You know, they had them, well, close to the road that way, and there's big banks over like it is right out there, but that platform run out into the road ditch there. And Harrison Hall, I think, yeah, run that store there. And when Franklin Swift lived there, well, he tore it down, had it tore down, and built this one. It's there now.
When did the oak level start to decline? I mean, when did like the stores and stuff start to move away, and the mills and stuff start to move away?
I didn't just catch it exactly.
Like, when did the mills and stuff and the stores and the saloons and stuff start to move away?
Well, I don't know. Just heard Mr. Badger tell about the saloon part. That was before my time, I suppose. Well, I know it was, because there was a sawmill sitting here, and well, I can't think who operated it then. I just can't call his name now that operated that mill here, sawmill. But Charlie Edwards operated that down here below the church. And they was the old men, and Mr. Reeves was too when he run that store there. Grocery store, well, Mr. Reeves had most anything that way in the store that to sell, you know. Had bolts of goods and things like that.
That's,
And, well, them stores have been there. Well, before my time, for I've heard Mama tell about going to the store there at each one of them.
when did they move away?
Huh?
When did the stores either get torn down or move away?
Well, it is quite a while after we moved down here, and not too long either, because Mr. Reeves was just getting too old to take care of the store. And his wife died. And I just don't know how many years that's been, but it's been several of them.
Well, do you think it might have been in the 20s or the 30s? Or 40s?
We was married in 1920, me and my husband. And he operated, Mr. Reeves operated this store a few years, just very few, after that.
So it was like maybe the late 20s or
And
early
they
30s.
just let the store go, till, well, they moved to Benton up here. And they sold this, and he had the store tore down. Well, before he sold it, and built her house up there at Benton. Great big store. Both of them was. And them stores was there before my time. 'Cause I heard Mama tell about come down here to the store and getting so and so, and then go to church, and they'd walk them days. And, one of my neighbors, Miss Holloman, she'd been dead a few years. And she'd tell about, they'd walk plumb over here to New Harmony Church. They didn't have ways to ride then, and even with their boyfriends, they didn't have ways. They'd just walk and go over here at Sand Hill, New Harmony to church, around that way, and go to parties. And used to have several musicals around, and they'd go to them. And I believe that's just about all, except when we'd go to church. I just really loved to go to church when I was just real small. See them women get up, old women, and shout. They don't do that nowadays. They just shout all over that place, and they'd have long hair, of course. And they just shout and shout till that hair would just come down their back. That was the most fun to me of anything else, almost, seeing them old women shout at church. Well, you don't never see nothing like that now. Well, now they may at these holiness churches, I don't know. I've not been, used to go to one down here, Dooms Chapel, but not now in a long time. And I believe that almost canvas.
Well, yeah, but there's what kind of things did,
Huh.
you were talking about these parties and stuff. What kind of things did they do with them? Were they dances?
Well, just, they'd have instruments, fiddles and guitars, things like that.
Well, can you kind of describe
And
what one was
they'd
like?
dance you in a lot, this square dance, old time way of dancing. And meet at people's houses that way. These close ones around. Of course, I was the only child at home, the only one they had. And they wouldn't let me get out nowhere overnight unless there's some girl with me. And I'd get to go to some of them that way. They was close around when, say, Dr. Helms' daughter would come stay all night with me, or maybe I'd go stay all night with her some night. And when there's a party or something like that, we'll go with them. That is pretty well their entertainment back in my young days.
There was very little besides that.
Huh?
There was very little besides that.
I didn't catch it.
I mean, there just wasn't a whole lot besides that.
No, not that I can, think out now. Of course, I never did get out much that way. They didn't let me. And I had to be in by 10 o'clock, no later.
You said that you lived most of your life within like a mile or so of here.
And
You said you lived most of your life within like a mile or so of here.
yeah,
What was the first chance that you got like to get away, and where did you go?
well, the only, you mean just
Just like,
visit or moving?
well, no, just, say, like, did you, like, say, your first time you get to go to Paducah or to Benton or something like that?
Well, only whenever Mom and Dad went. 'Cause they never would let me out much. And out of these dances, old time square dancing, Dad didn't believe in them. He wouldn't let me go to them. I slipped off and went to one when I stayed all night with one of my girlfriends. We slipped off and went, but I could just feel them licks. I knowed I'd get them when they got home. And my girlfriend said, well, just don't tell them nothing about it. I said, yes, I'm going to tell Mama about it and let her understand. And then I said, if it seems all right, I'll tell Dad, but I said if it don't, I'll let her tell him. And they'd go to Benton a lot that way for one thing to another. And after he got his T-model car,
When
that
was
is
that?
1920. Yeah, no. Yeah, I reckon it's 1920. It's right along there somewhere. I think him and Mr. Thomas Buckhart and somebody else, and I can't think who that was. All three got them the same year. Old time T-models. I believe it is about $500 they give for them then. Is the price of a new one. Well, they'd go to Paducah about through the summertime, about every month that way. Take off chickens and eggs and, anything that they had to sell, geese and turkeys. Mama raised quite a bit of turkeys. But Dad, he wanted me to learn so bad to drive the car. It'd make him sick, the fumes of that gas. He just couldn't take it hardly. And, well, I got to driving some, but I just didn't have nerve enough to go on out after they changed to these shift gear cars. I quit. I never did drive no more.
Or the first ones didn't have gear shifts on them?
No, see them T-models, they just had these spark and gas levers here in the wheel,
Mm-hmm.
And it was just the brakes and the,
They just had the one gear?
yeah.
Uh,
And he kept that, well, I don't know how many years he didn't keep that. And there's a man wanted to buy it. He's a doctor. And he sold it to him. He never did get there another one. He just couldn't stand the fumes. He'd just have to hold his nose that way when he was riding in the car. They made him so sick, just like a sick headache, vomit. Yeah, he bought that in 1920.
is there many people besides those three that had cars at the time?
Huh.
Were the cars really becoming popular then?
Well, we'd start from home up there, and a lot of times after I was married and we moved down here, him and Mama would go to town. They'd stop here, pick me and the kids up. I don't believe there's two of them then. Oldest child is daughter, and then Bill the next. And we'd just have the trip going down there with them and back. And that's when he had taught me how to drive. But you had to get out and crank them that way, and he's afraid I'd break my arm or something. They would try to crank it, and he wouldn't ever let me do that.
Mm-hmm.
And,
From what I understand, quite a few people got their arms broke with those things.
what'd you say?
I understand quite a few people got their arms broke on those things.
Yeah, Dad is so scared that I'd get my arm broken. He wouldn't let me do that. He'd always get out and do that. Of course, seemed like just learning that way on them T-models, you'd kill the motor often. I'd drive then, down to Woodlawn down here, And then, well, one car would be about all, well, I don't guess we'd meet anymore, just one car, and that was Tite Smith. He had a market house down there at the old marketplace. He did buy rabbits and all such as that, and chickens and everything. And he'd be on the road going or coming back one when, well, when we went down. That'd be the only car we'd meet between here and Woodlawn.
What about between here and Benton?
Well, I never tried much between here and Benton. There just wasn't no cars hardly back then.
What was Benton like?
Very few.
What was Benton like in those days?
Well, something like it is now, except just wasn't as many people there then as there are now. No factories. It's just the stores and the bank and let's see, jail. And I reckon that is about all there was.
And from what I understand, at one time there used to be a lot of bars and stuff, or a lot of saloons and stuff around the square there.
Well, it might have been. I just never did learn too much about anything that way from Benton. But I tell you, there's a lot more buildings and a lot more people there now than there was then. You can just go all the way around almost and be, let's see, I believe Teresa's Lumber Company was there at that time. And the doctors. But I can't think of the names of them now. Our family doctor lived at Brewer. And the banks. And just about, well, the courthouse, of course, it is there, but the one that I remembered well when I was a kid, it burnt before they built this one here. They always said George Slaughter burned it. You know, you may have heard it about they made a song, you know, out of George Slaughter burning the courthouse.
No, I haven't heard it.
I have not heard that song in a long time, but after it burnt, that they made a song, but I don't remember now how it went. But it's kind of touchy for him, I suppose.
Well, who was George
They made
Slaughter?
a song and they'd sing it on these radios, you know. George Slaughter burning the courthouse.
Who was George Slaughter?
Was he?
Who was George Slaughter?
Well, I just can't tell you anymore. He was some kind of business guy in the courthouse, but I just couldn't tell you now. I was just a little bit too far back to remember how that was. But I remember him so well about that song, George Slaughter, burning the courthouse.
When was the first, you mentioned radio, when was the first time that you remember listening to a radio?
Oh, I don't know. It's back, the first one we ever owned was back when the kids was little. Made different than they are now. There's as big as that little television there back them days. And there's very few of them then. It's mostly them Victrolas, you know, they'd call them. Had that horn on there, you know, kind of like a Morning Glory Bloom. And them round records, you know, you just slipped the on there. And they'd go around and around that way. That, they call them, you know, Victrolas.
When was the first one?
Them was back now. The first one I remember, I think I'm right, was Uncle Charlie Waldrop's. His mama's brother-in-law. And that was the first one of them I ever seen. Had them horns, you know, out. You've seen pictures of them, I guess. And then finally, Dad got one, but it had these disc records, you know, but didn't have that horn, just had that needle, you know, like they do now times. No, we didn't have very many records, but kids would come in there and oh, we played them over and over and over. Until we wore them out, I think.
Now, I'd like to go back. Do you remember, like, what was it, in the early 20s or the middle 20s when you had your first radio, or later?
Well, not a whole lot of a difference, except there's just more people. And of course I wasn't out too much. And after marriage, you know, stayed up there with Dad and them a long time, and then moved over there right close to them. Just wasn't out nowhere hardly. But it's something sort of similar, but quite a bit different too. New roads, new buildings, and people and facts. A lot of the older people was living then. Well, the young folks, younger generation, just ain't like the old folks was.
No, it's quite a bit different world for them to live in too.
Well, yeah. But that's been now. Mama had a nephew. They come from, well, over about Dogtown. They live, and it always snow on the ground, still a snowing. They come in a sleigh. Well, they had a small baby, and all three of them come in that sleigh over there and stayed all night. Went home the next morning, and you hardly see anything that way now.
Well, it's kind of strange because I've never seen anybody with a real sleigh.
Well. They used to have them a lot back. Well, I was 12 years old then when that was going on, and they had old deep snows. And I hope they don't have them here now like that. And they come in that sleigh over there, and I thought that was awful, because Mom and Dad would never get out when it's weather like that. And here they come in the sleigh to stay all night. And they got thinking after they got there, well, it might snow all night and get a lot deeper. And the man said, well, Uncle Will said, we may have to stay a week here if it snows all night. It's a pretty sleigh. Had 2 horses hitched to it. That's the way they travel around. And then when ice was on the ground, on the roads, of course, they had dirt roads at them times. I remember when I was living down here, when they gravelled this road, and just the last few years blacktopped it. And steel tar wagons, didn't have no tires on them, you know, rubber tires. And finally they got to the rubber tar buggy. Dad had a steel tar wagon, farm wagon, steel tar buggy. Finally he decided, well, he said they made so much racket after they gravelled some of the roads at his own. He said he believed he'd just get him to a blacksmith to put him some rubber tires on there. And then he's pretty well satisfied with that. Start betting them wagons and them steel tires, you know, and after they gravelled that Benton road up there, they just rattled and rattled. Yeah, they done a lot of sleigh riding. What nice would get on the ground, they'd take their horses to the blacksmith shop and have them ice shoes put on them where they could stand up, they wouldn't slip. Don't never see nothing of that now.
No, I did.
They'd have some a heel some way, and then a piece on their front of their hoof, and they'd put that shoe on. It'd hold them up, but it wasn't too thick that they couldn't dent it, you know, and walk in that way. But most everybody had horses. I don't think Dad ever did. He'd pack water down to his horse. Of course, he didn't use them. He'd always get his wood up in the fall. He said he'd rather get that and dust is on the ground as ice. He'd get his wood in there, everything done, ready for winter. But most everybody else, and they's fixing to get them sleighs started to go to the store, to go to mill or something like that. They'd have them ice shoes on their horses and mules.
Yeah, that's the first time I've ever heard about those.
Well, Lord, I seen a lot of that. And well, all ago when I was growing up till I was grown, and it seemed like, well, after so many cars come in, you didn't see that.
What are some of the kinds of things that they did back then that they don't do now?
What's that?
What are some other kind of things that they did back then that they don't do now? They used to see a lot of
Well,
them.
for one thing, they take, raise their corn and sit down in the crib, shuck it out, a big sack of it, and bring it to mill and have it ground, and for bread, or have it crushed for the stock. And you never seen hardly any. I don't know whether there was any. There might have been meal that you'd buy at the store, but everybody would take their corn and raise it, take the meal, have it ground into meal. And I just don't know if I remember. Well, of course I remember, but it's forgotten now. Too much more.
Well, what like?
And kids all walked to school and they didn't have no buses. I didn't think about a bus. They just, maybe walk a couple of miles to the schoolhouse up here.
What were some like the cash crops that your father and some of the other people, what were like some of the cash crops that your father and the other people around you had besides from tobacco?
What did they raise?
Yeah.
Well, it is just mostly tobacco. Was there something like soybeans raised now, but it's tobacco then, and corn was just, well, I don't know if they raised anything else. I don't guess he knows anything about soybeans at that time. And some raised cotton now. Mama raised quite a little bit of that and sell it. And sorghum to make their own molasses. And they fattened hogs. And about November it'd be cold enough to kill the hogs and put their meat in the smokehouse. Last all winter until killing time again. Lard, render that out. Make soap, homemade soap.
How did they happen to make soap anyway?
Well, see, they burnt wood, and they had a fireplace, and them ashes. Dad had a plank made like that.
Like
just,
a V?
Yeah, and they'd let them ashes cool, and they'd pour them in there. You see. Well, he had a log down here at the bottom. He set the end of them plank down there in, like a trough. Had it hollowed out like a trough. But one end it had sort of slanting. This end was cut out where water could run out through there. Well, they kept that. We put all their winter ashes in there, and spring come, the wood ashes, and the spring come, they would take and set a jar or something under there. That lye was awful strong. So they'd pour water in on them ashes, would draw water and pour in till it got to running, and that water out, and put it in one of them great big wash kettles, and then, let's see, they put in some meal, I believe, and some cracklings they had left from the hog killing, and put them all in that kettle and then boil slow to keep it from boiling over, and we'd stir and stir. And that'd thicken when they'd put some meal in there. And keep stirring. It took, I don't know, half a day, I guess, to cook it out. And get all the foreign things away from it to let it cool. And they had, Mama had kegs. I guess as much as 3 foot tall, wooden kegs, and they'd dip that up in an old bucket or something and carry it and pour it in them kegs in the smokehouse, They'd keep doing that till they got that all in there. Of course, that wasn't thick like cake soap. It was just like lobby mud, you know. They just reach in there and rub that up and down on their clothes and rub them on the washboard. And that was their soap. Now, they'd keep some soap for shaving. And, well, Mama used if she, well, took a bath or something, she'd use the shaving soap anyway. They kept that. That's the only soap they'd buy.
Mm.
And she got too old to fool with that, making that soap. It's quite a little job to get it made. But boy, it would bring the dirt. It's something like this Mary Warlife soap now. I've helped her make a many a kittle of that.
Definitely get the dirt off, huh?
It sure did. It got the dirt out of clothes. Just think it's just like a, you know, what we'd call lobby mud. It would get that thick. It would just dip out some, rub it up and down on them clothes, and then just go to rubbing on the washboard. Then it'd have a big kettle to boil the clothes in, the white ones. And they'd boil them, then take them out and ranch them and hang them up outside there and let them dry. Oh, they got everything easier now than they had then.
Well,
Yeah, that would be amazing for the young folks to see them things now. And all ever since I can remember on up till, well, I was married, they made that lye soap, but Mom and Dad just got too old to fool with it. And so they had this other soap, you know, and stuff in that way, washing powders, and they used them. Yeah, I went out and helped them many of a time, sucker the backer and work in hay. Me and Mom would tromp the hay down on that and pitch it up on the wagon and with a pitchfork, and we'd tromp that down, loose hay, you know. And then we'd go on to the barn. And he'd throw that up in the loft. Me and Mom would have a pitchfork. We'd pitch it off back in the back so we'd have room to, as he brought in the new load, have room to pitch it up there, and we'd say, "Ooh, under that hot tin roof, you talk about being wet as sweat we was." Pitching, he never did have no hay bale. It didn't bale hay too much back them times. It's all loose hay. Oh, there's a lot of hard work then, what then get out with plows and horses, pull the plows, didn't have machinery then, only cultivators, but and mowing machines, of course, it's horse-drawn. Yeah. And the rest of it, they're double shoveled and turning plows, one-horse plows, harrow. That's what they use. Corn drill, just a one-row corn drill. That went on all of my days, till way after I was married.
who was the first one in the area to get the first tractor?
Well, I just don't remember that. I just can't remember the first one I ever seen.
Do you remember about when it was?
No, I don't.
Well, what are some of the other things that...
And now, John Pinckney Owens might could help you there, I don't know, or maybe Joe Carper, hearing some of the older people, you know, speak about it. Of course, Dad never had anything out of it, only just what was horse-drawn. And me around home so close that way, well, I just didn't learn too much on what I learned at school. And of course, they didn't speak of them things too much. Then went to school till they was 21, that is before they, well, out of school age.
But when you went to school, were there very many...
Yes, there's quite a bunch of them.
What was the school like?
Well, it was just old-timey. We went to the Well, fourth reader, and then the next grade was, they called it advanced books, you know, them days. And that as high as it went in these just country schools that way. And they had benches that, well, they had metal frames and just wood planks for the back and seat. And we had two sit on the seat. Well, you know, the next seat in front of you had this desk. Under here you put your books in the desk up here and lay your books on top for two on every seat. And had two long recitation benches. There's homemade ones. And one on one side and one on the other. When I went around the class, well, them benches were usually always filled up with kids. Most every class. There's quite a bunch of them go to school.
And what kind of things did they teach?
Huh.
What kind of things did they teach?
Well, there's I had history, geography, and just the books, you know, to read. And let's see, health book, spelling, arithmetic, and that's all we had.
Did you enjoy
Spelling matches every Friday evening.
You ever any good at that?
Well, I was better at that than anything else, I reckon, 'cause not a bragging, a teacher was Willie Mathis. He's a good teacher, but he's kind of tight on him, but I liked him. And I could always spell better than anything else, and I wasn't worth a dime in arithmetic. And, well, whenever, let's see, they had head marks, they'd call it then. And if the first ones couldn't spell the word they pronounced, went on, say, like me, and I spelled it, I turned all that bunch down and I went ahead, they'd give you a nickel pencil for, you know. Of course, well, I was all proud of them, and it's true, but it kind of do me good whenever I could get to turn some of them down and, well, think that, oh, I could spell that word and they didn't. And I think, well, I wonder if I did spell that right. Well, sure they did. His teacher, he wouldn't put me out there. That kind of ticklish. Yeah, they all got a kick out of that. Sometimes they'd have a little game playing dog in the bone. Or,
How was that play?
I just nearly forgotten now. I have all of it, except they take that racer and lay it up on the rostrum there. And I don't know if it's spelling, I can't tell you now, I forgot how that went, but they all got so much kick out of that. But they'd run up there, whichever was, I'd call it lucky, would jump up there and grab that racer. They'd call it dog in the bone, but how the first went, I don't remember now to save my gizzard. How that went. But they'd have that Friday evening, something that, well, a lot of spelling matches, or let's see, there's something else, see. I can't think what that was now. Just whichever they kind of, well, they'd vote on it, you know, hold up their hand, and they'd ask them, the teacher, which they'd rather do. And one they got the most votes on, whether that's what they'd have on Friday evening.
Friday was a pretty loose day. Friday was a pretty loose day at school.
Yeah. Of course, that way they'd let it turn them out a little earlier in the evening than they did through the week. But I did love that spelling, but can't spell cat now hardly. Lost out. Ashford's wife was talking one day here, and I said, well, what good did it do me to go to school? I said, I forgot how to spell now. It's something I don't know how to spell. I said, why, you spell words worse than that. I said, how do you spell it? I said, what good did it do me to go to school? I forgot all I ever knowed.
You always keep some of it.
Uh,
You always keep some of it, even if it's
Yeah.
sitting in the back of your head.
But I don't know whether it's right or whether it's wrong, whether kids learn. Well, they did. They learned more in books than they do now. They have so many games, well, ball games and things like that. Now, they'd have that at recess. They're playing ball. But they didn't go off to no ball games, nothing. It was just absolutely books, and you had to know them too. Multiplication tables, you just had to learn them to memorize them, or you stayed on that page till that leaf was wore out of the book. Just threadbare. They wouldn't let you skip to let you almost memorize the lessons. To remember it, they just keep it there day after death is a month. They keep you on that. Sure, them old teachers, they didn't just let them kind of skip by like they do now, or like my grandkids talk. That's about all I know. I think that's the mail.
No, you want to go get your mail?
Huh?
And if you want to go get your mail?
No, didn't get nothing but paper. Don't reckon no way if got it. And I can't see to read it without a magnifying glass. And that's sort of a job to read a paper and hold a magnifying glass. And can't find glasses that I can read through. I can read the headlines, things like that, but the other print is just, I just can't see it. The doctor says it's allergy. It's causing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, back when you were growing up, do you remember many people having glasses? Back when you were growing up, do you remember many people having glasses?
Not only older people, just old folks, you know. Oh, say like my grandparents, but there's just a lot of old people that way could see thread needles. Now, my mother-in-law could, though she's up in the 80s. She could thread a needle. She pieced a lot of quilts. She could thread a needle, no glasses. Like the people just can't see as good now times as they did then. Even little school kids wearing glasses. Well, it was just a mystery to see a kid, little fellow with eyeglasses on them days. Unless there's, well, cross-eyed or something like that. They'd have glasses, and that was about the only way. I said, well, I reckon the Bible's fulfilled, weaker and wiser. I reckon people's eyes are getting weaker. Well, I've had measles, typhoid fever, and all this allergy, sugar, and I reckon it's just working me over. Doctor says it's not sugar wasn't bothering me. It was didn't show up, but it was allergy and sinus was what is damaging my eyes.
Do you ever remember a time back here when there was an outbreak of a lot of sickness or something? Do you ever remember a time back, when you were growing up when there was an outbreak of a lot of sickness or anything around here?
Well, nothing except, well, as children, I remember them having chicken pox, and these little fellers going to school, and whooping cough, well, maybe diphtheria, the sore throat. And it's very seldom to hear of any of them sick then. Even old folks, wasn't much sickness. And now it just seemed like everybody. Dad said, well, I heard him say a lot that doctors didn't make as much as they did in the last years with the he lived. He said they just wasn't nobody, well, they didn't go for checkups and everything them times. They're just stouter, I reckon. They're just, and now it just seems like everybody nearly is something wrong with them.
I see. I don't know. Is there anything that you can think of? Is there anything that you can think of that would go good on the tape? Any good stories?
Well, no, I believe I've just about run out on that as far as I can remember.
Well, what are some of the other things
Uh,
what are some of the other things that like went on around here, or on the level, when you were growing up, that you can think of?
well, I just don't remember. I don't think anything else. I want to just something similar like now, just
It's quite a neighborhood kind of thing.
only the neighbors all seemed to get along good back then. And they went to church just like they do now. And well, back when I can remember, see, they had mail carriers and mailboxes then. Lord, didn't get as much mail back then as it do now.
Not all that junk mail either.
Yeah.
Let me go see that.